Hello you guys, thank you for joining us for another RGI Easy Sewings tutorial. I am so happy to be here with you guys, and I am so happy to say that we are now up to 100 subscribers. So I want to thank all of you who have been looking at our videos, who have already subscribed. I just want to say thank you. We really appreciate that. We are glad to put out this content for you all, and of course the main thing for us is to ensure that it is helping you to improve your sewing skills, to help you to improve your fashion skills, and just help you to take your work to a higher level. So again, thank you so much for subscribing. If you haven't done that as yet, please go ahead and subscribe, and feel free of course to let us know if there is anything in particular that you would like us to show you. One of the people who pays close attention to our videos lets us know that one thing that she does is she uses that time to bond with her children, as well as she herself is improving her skill as she looks at the tutorial. So for those of you who may not have thought of that, that's an idea for you. Today's video is going to be a little bit different from what we normally do. I have some students who always call on me concerning different projects that they are working with, and then they just want clarification, they want assistance, they want some advice, as well as since I went into the fashion business and I have employed a few people, often I have areas that I do not expect to have to advise them on, but because that is something that I notice I often have to do, I just want to bring it out to you guys. Some of you may know all of this already, and you may already be using it as you do your projects, but some people may not even be aware or may not even be paying attention to those things. So I just want to point them out to you guys so that as you finish your projects, whether personal projects or whether it's projects that you are doing commercially, at least you will be conscious of them, and at the end of the day have a more improved product for yourself or for the clients you serve. So you can get out your pens, your pencils, your papers, your notebooks, or you can leave this video playing while you are engaged with something else. So let's do this. Tip number one is measurements. Measurements are very important, as that will affect whether or not your project fits. It will affect how wide it is, it will affect whether it is too big or too small. So at every point you want to measure. You cut, you measure. You put in your first few stitches, you measure. You put in your darts, you measure. So at that point, as long as you keep measuring at every stage, it will ensure that by the time you get to the final product, that your measurements would be on point. So tip number one is to measure. Tip number two is pay attention, and this would also go into measurements. Pay attention to your allowances. We have very often in class, our students would leave an inch sewing allowance while they are working with their project. However, when they come to sew the project, then they leave out half-inch sewing allowance. Of course, if that's what you do, it means that by the time you are complete with your project, it is going to be too large. Or we have the reverse, where they leave out an inch sewing allowance, and when they sew an inch and a half sewing allowance. So pay attention to your allowances, whatever allowance it is that you left for any particular area. You want to maintain that when you are actually sewing that. Tip number three is reverse stitching. Now, if you are doing hand sewing and you are doing a permanent stitch, you will need to put a knot at the end of your thread to ensure that everything stays in place. The equivalent to that knot when you are using your sewing machine is the reverse stitch. You want to ensure that when you start to sew, as well as when you end your sewing project, you use the reverse stitch. Otherwise, that area that you just sewed eventually is going to rip. It also means that in instances where you have some resewing to do, or perhaps you started somewhere, you had to stop somewhere, and then as a result you have to start again. Even in instances like that, you must use the reverse stitch. Okay, so tip number 3, ensure that you use your reverse stitching. Tip number 4 is thread matching. I had one student message me about that, and I think it's relevant to talk to you about it. You need to ensure as much as possible that your thread matches the color of your project. What I mean is, if your project is yellow, ensure that you use yellow thread and not white. I remember at one point someone said to me that her go-to threads are black and white. So as long as it's a dark color, she's going to use black, and as long as it's a light color, then she's going to use white. The truth is, matching thread to fabric is one of the things that makes your work look professional. So you need to ensure that yellow thread for yellow fabric, red thread for red fabric, unless if the intention is to have contrasting thread for whatever purpose that you plan. Okay, so if it is not something that is a matter of fashion that you're doing, or it's not something where you deliberately want your thread color to stand out, you need to know that your thread and your fabric should be the same color. Now, there are times when it would be a little bit difficult to determine what color thread to use, especially in cases where your fabric has many colors. In such instances, you want to go with one of 2 options. The first option is to use whatever color that is most prominent in that instance. So yes, the material is multicolored, but you will also see sometimes that there's a particular color that you can see more of, and then in that instance you can use that particular color. But sometimes, depending on the fabric that you are working with, the colors, you may have more dark colors than light colors, and then in a case like that you want to go towards the dark colors. And sometimes you have light colors and then you want to go towards light colors. So as much as possible, you want to match your thread to your fabric, or to be as close as possible, because you do have instances where you may not be able to get thread that is an exact match to the fabric that you are working with. So tip number 4 is to match your thread to your fabric. Tip number 5, and we're still on the matching, your zipper. If your project is going to be green, use a green zipper. If your project is going to be red, a red zipper. As much as possible, again, on the matching side, and because you want your work to be as professional as possible when it's complete, you need to ensure that you match zipper to your fabric. Okay. Of course, there are instances again where you are going for a contrasting look, and in instances like that, you can go with any zipper that suits your fancy. Tip number 6: iron, 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 iron. You need to iron your project at different stages. So you complete your dart, you need to iron. You complete your zipper, you need to iron. You complete your hem, you need to iron. At every stage, or at different stages, you will need to iron your project. Understand that that really changes the finishing of your project. So even when you complete your necklines, you need to iron those areas even before you put the entire garment together. It will change your finished work, and it will ensure that your work is professional. And my 7th tip to you guys is, please, as you work on your project, or if you don't want to do it as you work on your project, ensure that when you complete your project, you remove all threads that should not be a part of your project. So all of the loose thread, clip them out. I recommend doing it while you are working, because that way you don't have to remember where it is that you left a stray piece of thread. Also, double stitching. If you are making a second stitch because the first stitch was too large or it was too small, please remove all of the first stitch. Unless it's an instance where you double stitched for fortification, you should not have any double stitching on your project. That makes your work very untidy. So any stitch that is not intended to be a part of your project needs to come out. So guys, these are 7 tips that I know if you put them into practice will help you to improve the quality of the work that you do, and will help you to even feel better about your sewing project. Okay, I'm glad you stayed with me for this video. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Feel free to share this video with anybody whom you know will benefit from these tips. And remember, when you're doing your projects, as well as in anything else in life, put your best foot forward.